The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another version of Bite by Bite. I'm Tony Kurre, along with Michael Coleman, the CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. We have a great show called Mission Minded this week. Of course, we were talking about how to open up communication. We even talked a little Bible. I kind of like that. Our last show, that was good. And Bite by Bite, which is always a show that is entertaining, but also specific to the needs of the hungry people in this country, and servicely through Feeding America, which of course you're in partnership with. This is really interesting because we spoke briefly before we started this. How many billions of pounds of food are saved?
So 4 billion are saved, but there's still about 100 billion pounds of food in the United States that is wasted. So of that 100 billion, we save 4 billion.
That's amazing.
100 billion is going into landfills or is wasted to some degree. It's staggering.
And when you're talking about only saving 4% of everything that goes into landfills, I would assume right off the bat you're talking about the restaurant industry, but you're really not, are you?
Well, it certainly includes the restaurant industry, but it's bigger than that. I mean, it's even out for farmers. I mean, you think about just the average farmer who's going to go out there and he's got a certain amount of crop that he's able to get. There's always like whatever his order is from the farm. And then sometimes every farmer is probably going to have some crop that goes bad that he can't sell at the market. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Feeding America is trying to do is trying to use technology to identify where these type opportunities are, because if a farmer, let's say it's a product he can't move, not because anything's wrong with the product, but there's just no market for it anymore. A donation to the food bank rescues that food. He then can use that as a tax incentive or a tax write-off. But that food is rescued and brought into the food bank network. And then once we bring it into our network, then there's a whole other logistical network behind the scenes that's working to get it to where it belongs. So for instance, we're in Montgomery. If we rescued fruits or vegetables from a farm, we can bring it in. We let the Feeding America network know that we have this. Let's say we can't use it for whatever reason. Yep. We've had this before where we've rescued, right here in Montgomery, there was basically a truckload of bananas. And our Southeast Regional Office came along and said, we're never going to get all these bananas out. Well, they got the truck and sent it to a food bank in New York. So the food bank in New York got a full truckload of bananas that if we were not trying to rescue food, look at that as even our responsibility, they just would have dumped it in a landfill. And some companies like Tyson, you've heard me talk about Tyson, and how good Tyson is to the network, a great company, and they give us substantial donations. It's their miscut chicken. It's the same chicken. It just may not have been cut right. And so they get donated to us for that reason. But when I originally asked them, I said, well, what are you doing right now? This was before we were able to establish our relationship. And they're like, well, sometimes we box it up and we send it. Well, think about this. They put in large, these freezer boxes. They send it off to a storage facility. Well, they have to pay for that cold storage. Mm-hmm. And then they still have to try to sell it, even though they're miscut parts. And so you're like, well, grocers don't want them. You know, they were rejected for that very reason. So where's the secondary market for that? So lots of times they can hold on to a lot of product, and then they end up getting so much miscut parts. It's just part of the manufacturing process. And they're like, okay, this cooler's full, this cooler's full, this. So after a while, it just becomes more economically viable to dump the excess. And so they said at times, I mean, they said they didn't want to, but sometimes they just didn't have any choice. They would, dump fresh chicken in a landfill. Mm. So what we see it as, hey, there's a real opportunity there. And so we're looking at other plants to say, hey, every plant that's producing food is going to have, if you will, miscut. It doesn't matter if you're talking about animals, it doesn't matter if you're talking about, whatever crop it is. How can we capture that in a way that where everybody wins? Like right now, we have to put so much effort and time into going over there to Eufaula. We have to take it back 2 hours over there, 2 hours back, 3 hours to the processor in Georgia, 3 hours back. But then we move it out into our network and we get our costs covered. But so we send out chicken that we have packaged out of this all over the United States to different food banks who then distribute it out. That's all rescued food. But there is so much that we're not doing. And so Feeding America, there's a company called Divert and what they really are looking to do is get some of this excess. If it's not usable, they want to end up using it for renewable energies. How they do that, I haven't gotten into the science of how they do that. But to their credit, what they're saying is, look, we want to, first of all, we have to identify where is this food? Where's it coming from? What's the way that we can alert one another that this food's available? We want to claim it. And if it's still usable for humans, we want to use it there first. Secondly, for compost. And thirdly, if it can't be used for any of that or whatever, we have plenty of that, then we use it for renewable energy. But they are really the more and more technology that gets put into these. And people see how technologically advanced the farms are. I mean, we have such, we have lots of large farms, not as many small farms as we used to. But they talk about these GPS. I see 9-year-olds driving these huge combines because they map out the whole field and it'll go from one end of the field to the next and it'll be no more than an inch off. That's what, technology can also say just as easily, hey, we harvested everything we have. We have 3 truckloads, let's say, that we can't get to market for whatever reason, or is a subgrade, still good, but it's not the right size or whatever. Getting our hands on that and getting that into our network. And then once it's in our network, then it's in a broader network to then be redistributed. Those are the kind of things that are going on. And it sounds in one step like Feeding America is working to increase 1 billion pounds. Well, it's not going to be like, let's go out and get 1 billion pounds. It's going to be each food bank doing their part. It's going to be 5,000 pounds here. It's going to be 8,000 pounds there. And like you said, part of it is the restaurant industry. I'll make sure people understand, we're not talking about scraps off of people's plates that they need. Although I would tell you that's a huge waste that, how much food goes back and just goes in the garbage. Is that even part of is that even part of the 100 billion pounds you're talking about? The restaurant business? No, we can't recoup that. Typically what they do is when we have food that spoils or we have produce that's no good, we don't want to take it to the landfill. So what we try to do is we try to get pig farmers and everything else to come, and we're like, hey, no cost, we'll just give it to you. We would love to use it for composting. We would love to use it for any kind of thing other than to just throw it in a landfill. Sometimes it's the only choice that we have. And I will tell you one thing we are looking at, just like we're doing with our meat, is we're looking at doing a produce, almost kind of produce rescue, in that we will take produce that we have in the summertime and process it and seal it up in bags that can be frozen. And then that way that fresh produce will be available in the winter. And I get it's not literally fresh anymore, but it's frozen. But that same produce that we don't typically get in the in the wintertime, we're looking at doing that. And that's part of food rescue, is food that we get in that may have a week's worth of life, but can't make it all the way through our system and back out to people. We processed it and saved it rather than have to go throw it in the dump. That's food rescue. And so we're real excited about all the opportunities, but it it's eye-opening to people to think how much food is actually wasted. But there's a whole lot of people looking at every nook and cranny out there. How do we bring that into the network? And it just goes back to the overall saying, there is enough food in America to feed everybody. There's enough food in Alabama to feed everybody. We just have to do a better job of getting our hands on it and being mindful not to waste it.
And this is Bite by Bite.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.